Let's do Dandasana, seated staff pose, which is a really excellent posture for developing the appropriate muscle engagements for seated forward folds. And the reason why is because when you get down here on the ground, of course the ground is helping your legs stay parallel with the ground. But what's not helpful, the ground is not doing, nor is gravity helping you with, is keeping the torso upright. So we want to keep the torso upright by doing what we did in chair pose. We stick our bum back, even lift your belly up, so use your transversus abdominis. And as you stick your bum back, you can start with bent knees and place a hand behind your low back and try to get an arch in the low back. Then try to straighten your legs with an arch in the low back. You want to stick your bum back as much as you can while keeping your chest lifted, belly lifted, and legs straight. And you should feel back muscles, and I feel hip flexors firing up to do so. Pulling your toes back, pulling your kneecaps up, all of that's going to help kind of pull everything, the front of the hips into the hip sockets and trigger the hip flexors to activate. But low back active, belly lifted, chest lifted, and legs straight, toes flexed. Optionally, arms can go up overhead. Sometimes that makes it even easier a little bit, kind of lifts the chest up. But we want to send the low back forward, straighten the legs, pull the thigh bones like you're vacuuming them into the hip sockets. Pull the thigh bones back into the hip sockets. Okay, and then release. So you'll take your hands to your hips and slide your groins back, pelvis back, and tip your pelvis until the sacrum, you can place your hand, sacrum is right at the back of the pelvis here. You want this back of the pelvis level with the ground. I suggest pushing your heels out isometrically. You'll feel your buttock muscles at the top there start to engage. And when you do so, it'll help you activate your TFL. Lean forward towards your toes and keep your low back muscles active. Now, this variation of standing Dandasana is fairly accessible for most people, though albeit it might be challenging to keep the chest lifted. But we can increase the intensity by taking the hands to the heart, out to the sides, or the full variation, arms out in front without leaning too far back into your heels. Because if you do so, it makes it easy. You want to keep your chest lifted, back in an arch position, stick your bum up. So let's tackle our iconic seated forward fold to start this forward fold section of the immersion off. You're going to move your hips back. So what I do is I lean to my right side and pull the left thigh bone back and try to lean forward with the left chest. Then I lean to my left side, pull my right thigh bone back, literally move it back, and that will already pull you more into passive hip flexion. Flex the feet and come up into your Dandasana. Okay, the idea here is your low back tries to arch in order to pull your pelvis forward. Feet are about hip width apart, or you can adjust them as you go along in order to best suit you. Now we want to find the beautiful balance between passive and active. So you can take your hands to the ground at first, but your hands are more or less just kind of lightly tented there to try to give you an idea of which direction to go. Try to push the back of your calves and butt outward. You can wiggle side to side. I'm moving my heels out isometrically, and that will start to get your TFL, tensor fascia lata, engaged. So when you push the backs of the legs apart, it's spiraling the thighs in slightly, and now I've got TFL fired up, the outer hip flexor. Okay, so lean the belly button forward, lengthen the heart forward, and see if you can then release your hands from the ground and sustain the posture. Vacuum your quadriceps and your thighs back into the hips like you're trying to pull your thigh bones back into the hips while sustaining this posture here. Now your back muscles are probably exhausted. That's good. We're going to lean forward a little bit more. And then as you get deeper into this posture, if your belly is on your thighs, then you can start to relax your back muscles and become a little bit more passive in the posture. Now, what I am not passive in is my hip flexors. I'm still vacuuming the thigh bones back into the hip sockets. And then even think about lifting your thighs up or your legs up off the ground at the very, just like a little bit. And what you'll feel is kind of a suctioning of the hip crease back, getting deeper into your forward fold at your hip joint.
Now, if you're very deep in your hip flexion, you're like a pancake, then you might be asking, well, how do I resist the hypermobility at the hips? In this case, you stay where you are, but start to tuck your tailbone, and as you tuck your tailbone, your buttock muscles will activate, and that will resist going too deep into hip flexion. Okay, come on up.